Maybe you got so excited you were going to propose to somebody and then you got cold feet. But you know what it feels like to just get so excited and say, I'm going to do that. And then you really start thinking about it and you start thinking, what in the world was I thinking? And you go back to your old life, right? We do that over and over and over a certain number of times. Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, discovered a model, a pattern, an archetypal pattern, which he called the hero's journey, which is really, it's the journey of life. It's the spiritual journey. It's the journey that every person goes through. When we all are waffling, we're wanting to claim and to live our highest purpose and potential, and we don't know how not to go back to the old ways. We're in that very delicate space of, will I say yes? Will I say no? What will I do? Well, we need an original, compelling vision that is strong enough to take us higher and beyond who we currently know ourselves to be, or we will always go back. The hero's journey, there's 5 aspects to the hero's journey. That is, number 1 is that we're called to leave the familiar landscape of your life. Now, sometimes it's huge and dramatic, and you begin something in a new way. Maybe someone dies, or you move and take a new job, and you know that it's a clean start. But we make these every day in little ways. When children graduate from one class to the next class, anytime we take a step and we do something slightly different, we are leaving the old, the familiar, the empty nest syndrome. When our children leave, it happens all the time. We leave. And then we have this call to adventure. There's something that calls us out to explore and discover a new way of being. And then we encounter some sort of initiation. Think Harry Potter. Think Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. Think any of the characters in the Bible. They are placed in a situation where they have to discover some power or skill or gift within their own self. And they have to figure out how to use this, how to integrate it, and then they always go back to regular life and put it to use. We can realize in our life that we're always at different places in this journey. It's being played out in many different places in our own life. And so the first question we ask ourselves is, do I have an original, compelling vision every day that's fresh? A vision about who I am and why I am. Now, the second point that this story teaches us is that they did not recognize Christ. They did not recognize Jesus in the context of their regular life. It took a little bit for them to realize, and remember the scripture said this was the 3rd time that Jesus had appeared to them after he died and ascended. To me, what this tells us is that it is in the regular context of our life. That is where we will discover not only the Christ in you, the Christ in everyone outside of us, but most importantly, the Christ in our own way, in our own self. It will take place in the context of your own life. How does it happen? Yesterday, I was talking to my nephew, who is a sophomore at UNC Chapel Hill. And I was meditating, still thinking about my message when he shared the story with me, and I thought, it's so perfect. We do it all the time. He said that in February he took his mother for lunch. They went to lunch because it was mother's birthday. And my nephew is just, to me, for a college young man, he gets that he needs to learn about who he is, and this is the time in his life to do that. So he was having a conversation with his mother, and he said, I really want to do something special this summer. I really want to stretch myself and put myself in a new arena so I can learn more about myself. Well, his mother, my sister, who's a preacher's wife, said, well, our church youth group is going to Nicaragua. You should do that. And he's like, yeah, maybe not. It's my mom and dad's church. It's church stuff. It's da-da-da-da-da. No. He said after that, it just kept staying with him. So he finally went online and started looking about it, and he saw a person's picture that somebody he didn't know that was working with this program, and come to find out it was an alumni from the university where he goes. So he made contact with this man. Well, to make a long story short, what happened was he is going to Nicaragua this summer, but for a whole 6 weeks, and for something that's slightly different than his mother told him about. But do you understand that in the context of his own life, had he just said, no, that could never be it. But because he stayed with it, it opened a door to actually go and experience something else. It's in the context of our own life that will constantly give us opportunity to put ourselves in new places where we show up differently. You see, just as Giselle read this morning, discovering and living the Christ, it doesn't happen just like that. It happens breath by breath, encounter by encounter. Every single moment we are opening to this, or perhaps we're walking around asleep. And the goal is to continually open to it. The next point that the story tells us through all of this, what the disciples were being called to do, Jesus was finally saying, it's time for you to make it personal. You have followed my vision, my life, my story. Now is the time for you to make it personal. Never let your memories or your old story be greater than your calling or your vision. Think about that. Never let your memories or your old story be greater than your calling or your vision. He was having to quicken them and say, let go of what you thought it was going to be. Let go of thinking that it was all about me and find your own vision. You need an original, compelling vision that is going to create an arena for this to unfold in your life. And the next part, which is the pivotal piece, is how this would happen. One of my favorite quotes is by Emerson, and it says, Emerson says, what lies before us and what lies behind us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. This was the place where they were beginning to discover what lies within us. All right, turn to your neighbor and say, now we're getting ready to hear how we discover what lies within us. You can say it with a southern accent. We're getting ready to hear. We're getting ready to hear. Does anyone know in the 12 powers, our spiritual faculties, our capacities, the things that we use to access and to demonstrate our Christ, the truth of who we are, what does Peter represent? Somebody say it louder. Faith. Thank you, Miss Jane Tinker, who will soon be teaching a class on this. Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, in my opinion, the best work that he offered is right here in this little book called the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. Little book, yeah. Faith. Now remember, our goal is to begin to take this story and internalize it. Who is Jesus? Jesus represents the Christ that I am, that you are. Who are the disciples? The disciples represent the closest parts of me that know how to make that connection between my Christed self and myself that lives in the world. And Peter is central, and Peter represents faith, your faculty of faith, your capacity to demonstrate faith. We all have faith. Some people say, I don't have faith, and I say, have you ever sat in a chair? And they say, yes, and I said, you've got faith. Sure, we have faith. The question is, how do we direct it, and are we conscious of how we're directing our faith? Charles Fillmore says, Peter represents faith. Before he was named Peter, he was named Simon. Simon means hearing, signifying the receptive ability that we have to discern truth. And yet his name was changed to Peter by Jesus, which means the rock. This represents faith in God, strong, unwavering, and enduring. This faith is a necessary foundation for the building up of spiritual consciousness in the individual. Peter, or faith, was one of the first disciples that Jesus called. Faith is one of the first spiritual faculties to be called into expression in everyone who would follow into the life of overcoming, of actualizing our highest potential.